All right, today we're going to dive into something pretty incredible, the secrets of the world's longest lived people. We're going on a journey to figure out the science, the lifestyle, and the mindset behind hitting 100 years old and even going beyond. So are you ready to see the blueprint for a century of life? Let's get into it.
So, let's start with a number. Just look at this, 422,000. That is the number of centenarians, people living to 100, that are projected to be in the United States by 2054. This isn't some fringe idea anymore. This is a massive demographic shift that's already happening, and it's completely changing what we thought was possible for a human lifespan. So the big question is, how are they doing it? What is their secret? Is it just pure luck? Is it all in their genes? Or is it something we can actually learn from? In this explainer, we're going to tackle that head on because the blueprint to living a century is becoming clearer than ever.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start at the ground floor with the lifestyle choices we can all control. Then we'll talk about the social and psychological side of things, dive into the amazing biology of resilience, look at what role genetics plays, and then wrap up with the big picture of what this centenarian boom means for all of us.
All right, first up, and this is probably the most empowering part of the whole puzzle. It turns out that the huge majority of what gets us to a long, healthy life is actually within our control. This is where you and I have the most power.
Get this. This chart comes from the famous Danish twin study, and it basically turned everything we thought we knew on its head. It found that only about 20%, just 20% of how long you live is baked into your genes. The other 80%, that's all about your lifestyle and your environment. Just let that sink in. It means your daily habits are the biggest, most powerful lever you have for a longer life.
So where do we get this info? A lot of it comes from researchers who studied these incredible places called Blue Zones. You know, the spots on Earth with the most centenarians? And they boiled down their secrets into these core ideas. You can see it's everything from what you eat and how you move to having a purpose and a tribe. Let's dig into a couple of these.
This is one of my favorite concepts, moving naturally. You know, these centenarians, they're not hitting the gym for a CrossFit class or running marathons. No, they're gardening, they're walking everywhere, they're doing chores by hand. Their whole world is basically set up to make them move constantly and gently without ever having to think about exercise.
And then there's the food. Man, look at the difference between these two plates. It's night and day, right? The Blue Zone plate is like 95% plants, beans, greens, nuts. That's the foundation. Meat? That's a special occasion thing, maybe a few times a month. It's a total flip of the standard Western diet, and it's a huge lesson in how to fuel your body for the long run.
I love this. It's an old Okinawan mantra, Hara Hachibu. It just means stop eating when you're 80% full. Think about it, that little 20% gap between I'm not hungry anymore and I'm totally stuffed. Researchers think that simple habit, done over a lifetime, could be the difference between staying at a healthy weight or not. It's that simple.
Okay, so we've talked about the hardware, the physical stuff, right? Now let's get into the software of longevity. These are the social and psychological things that are just as critical for a long and, happy life.
You've probably heard of this word ikigai. It's a Japanese concept, but really it's just a simple, powerful idea, having a reason to get out of bed in the morning. In other blue zones, they call it plan de vida, but it's the same thing. And get this, having that clear sense of purpose can add up to 7 extra years of life. That's huge. And this is just incredible. In Okinawa, they have this tradition called a moai. Basically, from childhood, you're put into this small group of friends for life. One research team found a moai of women who had been together for 97 years. It's a built-in safety net that gives them financial, emotional, and social support their entire lives. Talk about resilience.
And that idea of resilience, it's not just about having friends to lean on. It's actually baked deep into their biology. Now, you might think living to 100 means you just never get sick, but the truth is way more interesting. It's not about avoiding disease. It's about being incredibly resilient to it.
This is the real magic trick right here. It's called compression of morbidity. It doesn't mean centenarians don't get sick. They do. They get all the same stuff we do. Heart disease, cancer, they just get it way, way later. In fact, studies show about 90% of them are living completely on their own, totally independent, at an average age of 93. They literally squeeze all the bad stuff into a tiny window right at the end.
And here's the thing, there's no single path to get there. The research shows there are basically 3 types of centenarians. You've got the escapers, they're pretty rare. They hit 100 without any major diseases. Then you have the delayers, who manage to push off those diseases until after they turn 80. And then the biggest group of all, the survivors. They got sick earlier in life, but they're just tough enough to live with it for decades.
So what's the secret sauce here? Well, it comes down to this really cool paradox called inflammaging. Think of it like this. As we all get older, our bodies have this kind of low-level, smoldering fire of inflammation. For most of us, that fire eventually causes problems. But centenarians, they're different. They also have a lot of signals that stoke that fire, but, and this is the key, they also have a super-powered fire department, an elite anti-inflammatory system that keeps the whole thing in perfect balance.
Okay, so we've got lifestyle, we've got purpose, we've got this amazing biological resilience. But to make that final leap from, say, 90 to 100 and beyond, well, that's where winning the genetic lottery comes in. This is the top of the pyramid.
But this is where things get really weird, and honestly, super cool. When scientists first looked at the genes of centenarians, they expected to find, well, perfect genes, right? Clean as a whistle. But that is not what they found at all. They had just as many bad genes, the ones linked to cancer and Alzheimer's, as the rest of us. So what gives?
The secret wasn't about what they didn't have. It was about what they did have, an entire arsenal of protective genes. This was a total game changer in how we think about aging. These genes don't just sit there. They actively fight off disease and slow down aging. They're like a built-in genetic shield. And we're actually starting to figure out what's in this genetic toolkit. You've got genes like ApoE epsilon 2, which is like a bouncer for your brain, protecting it from Alzheimer's. There's another one called FOXO3, which is like a master commander for your cells, helping them handle stress. And others, like some CETP genes, give people crazy high levels of good cholesterol, basically Teflon coating their arteries.
Okay, so let's pull back and look at the big picture. When you put all this together, the lifestyle, the biology, the genetics, you start to see why living to 100 isn't some crazy fluke anymore. It's becoming a real growing phenomenon.
I mean, just look at these numbers. It's absolutely wild. Back in 1950, there were barely 2,000 centenarians in the entire U.S., a needle in a haystack. Fast forward to 2020, over 80,000. And the projection for 2054? It's mind-boggling. This is a revolution in how long humans can live. And what's fascinating is who's making it to 100 now. For the longest time, it's been overwhelmingly women. And while they still make up the majority, that's starting to change. The number of men hitting that 100-year mark is growing almost twice as fast. That big longevity gap between men and women, it's actually starting to shrink.
So there you have it. Living to 100 isn't just one thing. It's this incredible mix of choice and chance. We have the foundation, that huge 80% lifestyle piece that's in our hands, and then there's that final genetic boost. We really do have the blueprint now, probably the clearest we've ever had for a long and, more importantly, a healthy life. So the only real question left is, how are we going to choose to build it?